Hi, thanks for listening to our presentation on the curious case of hallucinations in neural machine translation. My name is Vikas Ronak. I am a research scientist in the machine translation team at Microsoft, and this is joint work done with my colleagues Arul and Marcin. Hallucinations are the translation cases where outputs are detached or unrelated from the source. They are a well-known problem in NMT, but they aren't very well understood. Here's an example of a hallucination under source perturbation. On the left is a fluent and adequate translation of a Finnish source sentence into English. However, when this sentence is appended with a single token, a colon, at the beginning, the translation flips completely. Another hallucination setting is when the model generates a translation detached from the source naturally, that is, without any perturbations. We call such cases, as in figure 1, natural hallucinations. A prominent pattern in such natural hallucinations is the generation of repeating n-grams, as in figure 2. We call such cases oscillatory natural hallucinations. This is how we categorize hallucinations, and the paper is about finding what causes these categories of hallucinations by studying them under the lens of optimization and generalization in sequence-to-sequence models. To explain hallucinations under perturbation, our hypothesis is that the samples memorized by an NMT model are the ones most likely to generate hallucinations when perturbed. This hypothesis is inspired by the long-tail theory of Feldman, which posits that label memorization is necessary to achieve optimal generalization in long-tail data. So to test our hypothesis, what we want to do is measure which samples are memorized and then check if they are more prone to hallucinations. To measure memorization, we use algorithm 1, where we train multiple models on different random subsets of the data. And then memorization value estimate of a training source sentence is measured by computing how significantly the translation of that source changes when it is included in a training subset versus when it is excluded. Then to measure the number of hallucinations incurred by a set of sources, we make use of algorithm 2, which basically considers a source to be hallucinated if its translation changes significantly when a single token is inserted at the beginning. Putting the two algorithms together, we can measure the number of hallucinations incurred by a set that has the most memorized samples versus a random set of the same size from the rest of the data. Here we find that the memorized set gets significantly more hallucinations than a random set. And in the paper, we show that this observation is quite robust under different analysis settings as well. Also, another characteristic of hallucinations is that they are accompanied with deficient attention maps. It turns out that memorized samples share this trait as well. And if we compare their attention entropy or diagonal attention entropy, it is considerably less when compared to a set of random samples. Another question is, what are the characteristics of the memorized samples? On the top table are some source sentences with high memorization value estimates. In the bottom table are sentences with low memorization value estimates. The samples in the bottom table seem to have traditional sentence structures. For example, many of them start with a personal pronoun. And intuitively, samples in the top table seem either poorly labeled or have different sentence structures. For example, for the last one, the model has to learn that mjam goes to gobble, and mjam isn't really a German word. These results are quite similar to Feldman et al.'s analysis for ImageNet uh, classification task, that the highly memorized samples tend to be images that are mislabeled or are just outliers. For example, here, the top row has some high memorization value samples for the ImageNet bobsled class, and the third one clearly looks like an insect. Now, for understanding natural hallucinations, consider an example from an internal noisy dataset we built to study hallucinations. Consider this source sentence in Indonesian. Its correct translation is something about currencies, but in the training dataset, repeats of the same source sentence are present with multiple different targets, which are actually invalid translations. The NMT model, which is trained under maximum likelihood, learns to generate something for this source sentence. And what does the model learn? It learns to generate there are, which is present in a majority of references in this case. And then it learns to generate zeros. So what the model is learning is on average to maximize the likelihood of the existing targets. And this is leading to really weird translations in the presence of these noise patterns in the data. So to explain natural hallucinations, our hypothesis is that it is the corpus level noise patterns that dictate the type of natural hallucinations generated. We try to validate this hypothesis by construction, that is, we design noise patterns, add them to standard datasets, and then try to draw links between noise and hallucination patterns. So the first noise pattern is the RU noise, in which a single source is mapped to multiple targets. In the parallel corpus, repeats of the source will appear with unique targets, hence the name RU. The second is the reverse of this, the UR noise, in which multiple unique sources will map to a single target. The third is UU noise, in which unique sources are mapped to unique targets, while the last one is RR noise, in which a single source is mapped to a single target and both are repeated multiple times. So each noise pattern is designed to present a different optimization problem to the underlying sequence-to-sequence NMT model, and they differ in terms of the number of representation pathways or contexts that is available for the invalid error to propagate. The hypothesis is that RU noise will increase decoder instability since the same inputs have to be mapped to different targets, while UR noise will do more damage to the encoder. The effects of UU will be a composition of these effects, while RR's impact will be quite restricted. So once we train models with these noise patterns, what we find is that we can replicate some prominent natural hallucination patterns. For example, figure 4 shows that UR noise leads to the model generating an unrelated target sentence, while RU noise leads to oscillatory hallucination patterns. And we can quantify this by analyzing the outputs, which point to specific causal links between a noise pattern and a hallucination pattern. For example, we show that UR noise leads to a number of translations where a target present in the training data gets generated for unrelated source sentences. On the other hand, RU noise leads to outputs that have very low bigram diversity. And these patterns could be used for diagnosing models and data sets whenever we see a hallucination with particular properties. Further, based on our analysis, we built metrics to estimate number of hallucinations in given empty input-output pairs or any parallel corpus. For example, oscillatory hallucinations can be detected via the heuristic that if the count of top n-gram in the output exceeds the count of top n-gram in the source by a threshold, then it can be considered an oscillatory hallucination. And using this metric with properly tuned thresholds, we can compute hallucinations at different stages of the NMT pipeline. When we do so, we find that there is typically an amplification in hallucinations when we go from a parallel dataset to the KD dataset generated using noisy models. In particular, the UR noisy model leads to a large number of target repeats. So to conclude, our paper presents a comprehensive study of hallucinations in NMT and opens up a number of exciting new problems as well, such as characterizing the long tail in sequence settings, finding linguistic correlates of memorization, and a number of problems in building better systems under specific noise patterns. Our code will be available at on GitHub. And thank you, and hope to see you at the interactive session.